Okay, seem to be on. Just gonna wait. All right, let's see. Am I live? I'm gonna wait for myself to pop up here. It's interesting how YouTube has this lag, but okay. We're waiting, and I'm waiting. When I see myself pop up, then I'll start. Oddly enough, it's taking longer than usual. 45 seconds. Okay, here we go. I'm live. It's the Nazarite bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. So I wrote in the chat right before I started here, I was at a wedding last night. That's why I wasn't here. I came back at around 2:30, 3 a.m. Just before 3 a.m. It was awesome. It was lovely. I danced my ass off. I haven't been to a wedding in some time. It's one of my favorite things in the world, a wedding. I've only ever been to Jewish weddings, some more secular, some more religious. I don't know if I'll attend different sorts of weddings. I honestly don't know, but so far it's been only Jewish weddings. That's why I wasn't here last night, and it was a blast. I love it. I truly love it. So there are a few comments that I wanted to get into, but first I'll go here to the chat. I heard, it says Robert Harrison first. Hi, Robert Harrison. Hello, Peace and Coffee. 2 others are watching, apparently, other than you two. So hi there, whoever's watching. And I already have a like. So much fun to broadcast with you here. Okay. So Robert says, I heard a lot of biblical romances happened at the well when the women would go get water. Well, I don't know about a lot. The more famous one is Abraham's servant, who traditionally, though not according to Torah, traditionally is called Eliezer, but in the story in the Torah, he's only ever called Abraham's servant. So, but for all intents and purposes, Eliezer, when he went to seek a mate for Abraham's son Yitzchak, and that's where he met Rivka, whose brother was Lavan. So a lot of biblical romances, likely, because that's where shepherds and shepherdesses, if you will, would come and meet. That's where people who would want to fetch a pail of water, right? Jack and Jill, to fetch a pail of water. Incidentally, there's a different ending to that rhyme. Is it very tragic? I don't recall, but I recently was reminded, because I think I knew it in the past, reminded that it has like a very tragic ending, doesn't it? All those rhymes seem to be based on tragedy. Okay, let's just keep going. Biblical romances. Do you know of others? The first one that comes to mind is Yaakov and Rachel, is Yitzchak and Rivka, or Eliezer and Rivka. Are there others that happen in the well? Right? I'm thinking of of Abraham's servant and Rivka, and later on Yaakov and Rachel. But I don't recall others offhand. Moses and the daughters of Yitro, of Jethro's daughters, right? He meets them there too, at the well. And it's again shepherds and shepherdesses. So, yeah, let me know if you know of any more, because that's a good question. And it seemed to be like the watering hole is where people would meet. So it kind of makes sense. All right, Peace and Coffee. Hey, Yon, did someone give the new couple a gift of chickens? 5 chickens, one for the first 5 Sabbaths of our married life. You know, it's possible, especially with the couple that was married last night, that they did receive some chickens. Well, first of all, there were chickens there, but they were in the form of a schnitzel, right? A chicken breast covered in breadcrumbs and fried. So I'm guessing that's not what you are talking about. But it could very well be that somebody gifted them chickens, but I was not aware. So, not as far as I could tell. I plan on giving them cash. But, okay. So, Robert Harrison said, Ketuba, Kittel, Chuppah. Yes, it's true. Does every husband, asks Robert, does every husband have to fast before ceremony? No. I fasted, but it's a tradition since the day of a wedding. For the couple is their own personal holiday of atonement, and as such they fast, though it's not a fast from night till nightfall. but one from sunrise till nightfall. So it's a little different, but it nonetheless is considered a holiday, a personal holiday of atonement, as opposed to the national, general holiday of atonement, also known as Yom Kippur. So the ketubah, since you mentioned it, the ketubah is the deed of marriage, which is a technical sort of binding legal rabbinic document where where there are two witnesses, ideally and halachically male, Jewish, over 13, and they basically bear witness to the fact that this groom asked this bride to be his woman, and she acquiesced, and it specifies the dowry, and it specifies the obligations of the groom towards his bride, what he must do, and what if it needs to be annulled, what if the different ways in which the groom binds himself to his new woman. So that's the ketubah. The kittel is the traditional garment, not worn by everyone, but I wore one. Traditionally, it also is worn on the Holiday of Atonement every year on Yom Kippur and the high holidays. The people who lead the prayer also wear them, and it's you're also buried in them. If I'm not mistaken, you're some people are buried in them. I don't know. I don't know much about death and burial because I haven't had to deal with it, and I didn't learn those halachas, those rabbinic rules and laws. But it's once again, since it's a holiday, a personal holiday of atonement, you wear that to remind you of life, and you wear it to remind you of death. I wear it every year during the Yom Kippur holiday, my favorite holiday. I gladly wore it under the chuppah, and the chuppah is a canopy. It can be pretty much anything. It can be just it can be a talis, right, a prayer shawl that four people hold in different, four people in different corners, and they stretch it over the bride and groom. Or it can be a literal canopy that's built on sticks or stilts or something like that. Or it can be just like a pergola, like a Roman pergola kind of thing, and that's what they were married under last night. So not every husband has to fast. I very much enjoyed my fast. I barely ate at the wedding, too. I was I didn't feel the need to eat. People kept saying, you need to eat. Hey, or have a drink. Here, have something to eat. Have some. But it was such an amazing thing. I didn't feel the need really to eat or drink. Certainly not the day of. Day of, I was busy with my two personal guards, as is tradition as well, for two people to accompany and guard the groom, lest he be damaged or otherwise hindered. So that was a fabulous day, fabulous. When I was oh, what's the word I'm looking for? When I was applying to get into film school here, one of the tasks that I had to write is describe or write about a major event in your life. And I wrote I wrote a couple of pages about the day of the wedding, not the wedding itself, but the day of, from the sunrise when I woke up with my shomrim, with my guards, until the wedding itself, until I walked into the chuppah. And when I went for the interview, since I passed the tests, the home tests, if you will, and I passed the first round, called in for an interview, and the first thing out of one of the four panelists who were interviewing me, the four interviewers, one of them who, I hold all of them in high regard, but one of them, and I may have mentioned this, what a way to start an interview applying for film school. He said, I must first of all compliment you on this piece, and he referenced the one that I wrote about the wedding day. And I've always loved it. I occasionally reread it, because even though I wrote it, and I don't mean to be proud or anything, I'm not, or vain, I love the way it was written. I truly wrote it from my guts, and he picked up on that. Also, it's written in nice Hebrew, let's put it that way. I put a lot of thought and effort into it, and that's the first thing. I walked into the interview, and he said, before any questions or anything, listen, I have to compliment you on this piece that you wrote. I wrote a few different pieces, and that was one of them, a significant event in your life, and I chose my wedding day. So yeah, the wedding yesterday was a blast. I love how the bride is supposed to circle the groom 7 times. Yes, he gives her a ring to sanctify him, like a physical thing, and she gives him a metaphysical ring around himself, not just on a finger, but on him, around his being. She walks around him 7 times, traditionally accompanied by her mother and the groom's mother, and they walk around 7 times. That is correct. Yes, I like that too. I still remember. I remember my wedding day. Someone asked me yesterday, since it was my Hebrew anniversary. And he asked me, so how did you feel? Do you still remember what it's like to be in that wedding, to experience your own wedding? I said, oh hell yeah, I remember. I remember. I do. Okay. What's the deal with the chair dance? It looks like fun. Oh, it is fun. It is so much fun. You bring the bride, you bring the groom, you bring them separately, you bring them together. You lift them up because the groom and the bride are a king and queen. Some say only for the first 7 days of marriage, where the feasting goes on, and some say for the entire year. I'm more of a fan of a king and queen for the entire year, because it's there are certain traditions and customs that are reserved for the bride and groom for that first year of marriage. I couldn't partake of some of them because I was in the army the first year, but it's the deal. I don't know the deal. I don't know the origin. I just know that it's to lift them up, right? To lift them up physically, because they are royalty. Though it might have a different origin and a different meaning altogether, or just for fun, right? It's a fun thing to do. What's a hopa? Unseen Waters. Hello, Unseen Waters. Good to see you. So a hopa is a canopy, right? It can be made of fabric, it can be made of wood, it can be made of anything really, and it signifies a kind of divine revelation that is on top, right? And there are four corners, and there are different angles, and it represents the tree of life by and large, and the way that God reveals Himself in the world, right? With the top and the bottom, and the chassan and kala, the bride and groom, at the center, having a union. Do I live in Israel? Yes, I do. I am live from Jerusalem at this very moment. I know nothing of going to a wedding, says BMXers. Hi, BMXers. So I don't know what to ask, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Oh my God, do I enjoy it. What's your father-in-law like? He is dead. I never got to meet him, so I don't know. He died when my bride was very young. Derech Hagav, happy Hebrewversary. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm very grateful, very thankful, very privileged and honored to be married over 2 decades now to my woman. She is something else. Okay, so I'll keep going with the comments, I suppose, if I see them coming in. But right now I'm going to go to BMXers, who's here, and he also said, Rabbi Nanak reminds me of Guru Nanak or something of the Sikhs. So I know of the Sikhs. I know of their 5 articles of faith that they wear, right? It's the hair, and it's that bracelet, it's a dagger. I know that not all Sikhs have all 5. And I made it a custom, well, not a custom that I follow religiously, but if the mood struck me and I would see a Sikh in the Netherlands, because I don't come across them here. Back when I was living in the Netherlands, and there are plenty of Sikhs there, I would occasionally, if the mood struck me, I would turn and say, do you mind if I ask you a question? And it would invariably say, yeah, sure, go right ahead. So which of the 5 articles of faith do you have on right now? And I have yet, I didn't ask like dozens and dozens of them, but I asked a few, less than 10 overall, and not one of them, I don't say this to throw shade, right, but not one of them had all 5. Most of them had the turban. Most of them had the bracelet. One of them, I think, had a dagger. My mind is failing me right now on the other 2 articles of faith. If it is indeed 5, it might be 6. Someone correct me in the chat. The articles of faith of the Sikhs, if that's what it's called, right? What are they? What are they? I don't know. I know those 3, if I'm not mistaken. And there are probably 2 others. So I don't know Guru Nanak. Do you mind, BMXers, giving us a bit about Guru Nanak and how Rabbi Nachman, or do you mean Nanak as in Rabbi Israel Dovber of Odessa, right? The person who got the note with the Nanak. Do you mean he reminds you of Guru Nanak? Or is it just the name Nanak and Nanak? So, let me know what you meant, because I'm interested. Paul Torbert asked, or said, we had a big back and forth a few days ago here in the chat. He wasn't involved, but he watched it presumably, and he says, may I apologize for my Christian brothers and sisters, as most teaching here about evangelizing aren't really taught fully, right? So there's a lot of evangelical Christians and Messianics here in this chat all the time. As you know, it's an open dialogue, right? We are discussing faith and religion and spirituality. And unless you're trolling heavily, and spamming the hell out of the chat, I'll basically give you the platform, to address your comments, concerns, questions, and slurs, whatever it may be. So there is some evangelism going on here, obviously. Those who are regulars, if you will, have noticed it, to be sure. So Paul Torbert continues and says, I liken it to someone kicking in the bathroom while we are trying to poop, just barging in with their viewpoint, he says, while we are already trying to get the bad stuff out of our life to replace it with God's desire for us. They mean well, he says, but aren't taught well. He continues and says, I'm not taught well, but I do try to be clear. Well, I guess we're alike in that, right? And I won't bother people unless they are interested in hearing about the whole history and plan being capital H, capital P, involving Israel and the nations, us Goyim, he says. So as you know, or Paul, if you're here, or if you're listening, or others who are listening, I hear what he's saying about barging in with your own viewpoint, and to not bother people unless they are interested. I understand what he's saying, obviously. I suppose I'm, a bit of this and a bit of that, a bit of column A, a bit of column B. But like I said before, I do understand where these Messianics and Christians are coming from, because according to them, they have found something so spectacular, so wonderful, so earth-shattering, right? Literally overcoming death, literally forgiving and washing away all sins, literally the King Messiah, the Anointed One. So they want to share that with the world. They want to share that good news, as they call it. And I don't fault them for it, right? Now, he says that most teaching here about evangelizing aren't fully taught. And it could very well be that you don't necessarily have to be the most educated or the most knowledgeable or the most eloquent or intelligible to be able to want to share that amazing truth found. You can't keep it bottled in. You need to share it with the world, upsides and downsides. And I've told this very famous story before when I was getting more into the faith, when I was 18, 19, and when we would have discussions with friends. There were one or two times where afterwards, well, once, but it happened after a couple of times, where my woman, who wasn't my woman at the time, but I knew her, she said, you know what, you came off a little condescending when we were talking earlier to our friends over there, when we were having the discussion. And that's when I knew, A, that she's very special, because she could tell me that I was being condescending without hurting my feelings. She was literally trying to tell me, hey, try to do better. And she was able to enlighten me to the fact that, yes, I felt such a deep truth, such a fire burning inside of me, that I felt like I had to get it out. And the reason why I was sounding condescending was probably because I was so interested in having to say my piece, that I wasn't really talking, I wasn't really engaging in a dialogue. I was only waiting for my turn to speak. That's condescending. That's not really listening. That's not having a dialogue. That's waiting to speak. That's not the same thing. She pointed that out, and that's when I knew she's really something special. So he continues and says, my grandparents and mom, says Paul Torbert, are secular Jews. My dad and his parents are Methodist, yet secular. Trippy situation, he says. I hold Torah to be true and holy, and the same for the New Testament. He says, I consider myself a follower of Yeshua and a Noahide. Oh, and he concludes by saying, as a musician, what do you play? I don't know. Maybe if you're listening, you'll say. As a musician, he says, I might be a little scattered or weird. Well, we don't want any of that here now, do we? It's literally Wednesday weirdness. Let's go, people. But I believe he says in the Creator's covenant with Israel, with about, 10 exclamation points following that. So, kicking, he said he likened it to someone kicking in the bathroom door while we are trying to poop. And that's an interesting analogy, right? So coming in with their viewpoint, he says, while we are already trying to get the bad stuff out of our life. So while they might not consider their barging in to be something bad, it might be happening not at the most convenient time. And I'll even take it a step further. He said necessarily, right, trying to poop. It's something private, it's something that is kind of unclean. So you may have the best intentions in the world where you barge in here and you want to spread the news, but you need to think of the time and place. Hello. All right, let's continue here with the chat. Jesse, hi, Jesse Links, hi there. Unseen Waters says, I know the tree of life was the tree Adam and Eve wanted to eat of, but the serpent talked Eve into eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's the reason they were kicked out of the garden, from what I remember reading. So yes, they were kicked out for, well, let's put it this way. I've always considered the real sin to be what happened after eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because to be curious and to be tempted and to fall, that's completely human. But then afterwards, when God calls out to Adam, Ayeka, where are you? And he says, I hid from you because I'm naked. And he goes, who told you that you're naked? Have you been eating from the tree that I told you not to eat from? And Adam, instead of humbling himself and saying, yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself, he goes, the woman, she did it. And then he goes to the woman, and she also doesn't go, yes, I screwed up, I messed up, I'm so sorry. Let's try, let's start again, I'll be better. It's like, no, the snake, the serpent tempted. It's like that blame shifting. I think that was an even more egregious sin than the simple missing of the mark that happened with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because to err is human, right? But part of our image of God, part of our higher humanity is that ability to get over our errors and to become better. And that's where they screwed up. They didn't necessarily screw up by disobeying God that first time. Not necessarily. The major screw up, I think, was not simply eating from the tree from the fruit of the tree that they were told not to eat of, but that blame shifting, that pinning it on somebody else, that was like the nail in the coffin of their stay in Eden, and they could not stay there afterwards. And it's a story which teaches, I think, a lot of humility. It's why the story of the creation is one of my favorite. It's probably my favorite part. My favorite Torah portion is Bereshit, is Genesis. So they were supposed to eat of it according to the external teachings, according to Midrash and others. They were supposed to eat of it when the Sabbath came in. But that original Edenic Sabbath never took place because before the sun had set on the sixth day, they had already been cast out and banished. And so we are now stuck in between worlds, if you will, in a world of knowledge of good and evil, trying to get back to Eden so we can complete that mission. But there is also the teaching that says that the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life is the very same tree. It simply existed as knowledge of good and evil on the weekdays, and it would have transformed into the tree of life on the Sabbath. And then they would have been able to partake of it, and well, whatever would have been then would have been. And now we have what's the lower Sabbath of this world, the Sabbath of the knowledge of good and evil, where they do exist, and it's a taste of the world to come, but not quite the world to come. So yeah, what you're saying is kind of true. It's the one they wanted to eat of. I don't recall a verse saying that, but it makes perfect sense that they would want to eat of it, especially when you consider the teaching that it could have been the same tree, but manifesting in different forms in accordance with the state of Eden at the time. You left the door up? Oh, thank you, my love. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Where were we? Oh, Jesse says, any king in Israel has to be subject to the Torah. If not, he can't be a king. Well, I don't think that's true, because historically speaking, many kings, particularly of Israel, but also of Judah, were anointed kings or kings by succession, called kings, but they weren't the best kings insofar as keeping with the commandments and the Torah. There were many false gods and idols and altars and sacrificial places there, and they were still called kings. So, if you're talking about now, or you're talking about then, I think an anointed king can still be king. And while it's obvious that the king ought to keep the Torah as the ruler and the keeper of the law, right, and the right, a king in his kingdom, an image of God as Malchut, the ideal would be, yes, that he would be a keeper of Torah and commandments, but it's not necessarily, he doesn't have to be that de facto. I'm just saying that historically, according to Torah, he definitely does. And there's the commandment that he needs to write himself a Torah, and he needs to keep it on his arm. or tie it onto his arm. There are different halachas on what the king needs to do, but basically a king needs to be reading the Torah his entire life, much like the rest of us. So he does not become proud. So he does not become arrogant. So he understands that no, he's a man like any other man. He has this power temporarily. He has authority, sacred authority, temporarily, to lead the children of Israel, right? To lead them in times of peace, to lead them in times of war, to lead them, physically speaking, in the way that they, right? Because we had prophets and we had priests and we had others, and the king also ideally ought to keep the Torah and the commandments so he can be a righteous king, and so his sons and daughters can succeed him. Let's see. He actually has to write 2 copies for himself. Yes, exactly right, Jesse. That's correct. Robert says, Torah says the Philistines descend from Ham, but some people say Crete, a Grecian island. Yes, I mentioned this the other night. In Mediterranean Sea, but still trying to figure out where they went. Yes, I've heard that they have Grecian roots as well, because, as I said the other day, or night, the Plishtim, the Philistines, were not part of the 7, they were not one of the 7 nations that the Israelites were commanded to eradicate upon entering the land of Canaan, which means that they came in from the outside, and they invaded the land, or they settled next to it, and then invaded, the different tribes during the times of Joshua, and during the times of the judges, right? And Samson very famously fought them, and others. Okay. The Yichud ceremony, says Robert. So the Yichud, after the different rituals are conducted under the chuppah, which is the engagement and the actual marriage, they both happen simultaneously with the ketubah being read in between, right? So you have the engagement, what's called kiddushin, you have the reading of the ketubah, and then you have what's called nisuin. So engagement, ketubah, marriage, all of that happens at once. And then the bride and the groom are led off with song and dance and much joy and cheering to a room where they spend time together, time which traditionally is enough time for them to sleep together and consummate the marriage. They don't necessarily do that in that room, but it's enough time that passes together for them, alone, secluded, so hypothetically speaking, they could consummate the physical consummation, right? Just have sex right there in the room. But again, that doesn't happen there. Mostly what happens in that room is the bride and the groom take a breath and have something to drink, have something to eat, especially if they've been fasting all day. And maybe after a few minutes, a photographer comes in to grab those first photos of husband and wife together, just them. Oh, maybe not. Each couple is different, right? And then they come out sometime later for song and dance and merriment, and oh my God, so much joy. That's the yichud. Yichud means togetherness. Yachad means together. Yichud means coming together. Not to be confused with ichud, which is unification. Right? There's yichud and ichud with an aleph. Okay. Where were we? Correct. That was the real sin. I mean, both of them were sins in the sense of missing the mark, right? Chet. Chet means lahachti, to miss the mark. And I think it really was the real sin. It really, really was. Because again, to err is human, and to rise above our error, that's the real image of God there, working inside of the human flesh and blood. So after they had already sinned and their eyes opened up, right, then they could have, but it just didn't happen then, and that's part of what we are supposed to be doing here, right, to correct that. BMXer says, oh really? I didn't know there's a lot of Sikhs in the Netherlands as well. There's none in South Africa, but a lot in England. Only knew about the turban, of course, and the dagger. So I think there are 5 articles of faith that the Sikhs traditionally keep. Again, not all of them keep all 5 at one time, but I think it's 5 articles of faith that they keep. BMXer says, I don't know anything about Guru Nanak. I only heard about the name before, and it was just the name Rabbi Nanach that reminds me of the name. Well, okay. So yeah, Nanach, Nachman, Nachman, Meuman. Unfortunately, yes, says Jesse. Well, again, he's referencing something that I was saying back then, a few minutes ago. What is your definition of a humble person? First of all, everybody, feel free to shout out right now in the chat. What is your definition of a humble person? A humble person, to me, is somebody who acts in accordance with the time and place that he or she are in. Right? To be humble is to be aware, because somebody who is truly aware is humble by definition. Because if you are really aware of yourself to the degree that you can be, it immediately brings humility. Because you could die any second, and you're fallible, and you're fragile, and you're probably rife with sin and inadequacy and weakness, alongside many strengths and virtues and good things, to be sure. But we're mixed. We're very mixed. So to me, humility is to be aware of your time and place, and to act accordingly. That's the definition of humility to me. Correct, that's what I meant. I just couldn't word it right, says Jesse. Okay. Oh, whoops, the chat. What's happening? Come on. Okay. BMXer says, there's nothing wrong with the audio on my end. There's something wrong, he says, with the audio on my end. Anybody else? All clear, says Jesse. Okay. By the way, says BMXers, did you know the word brandy came from Dutch? That it comes from Dutch? No, I don't, but do fill me in, fill us in. So no bom chicka wan. No, I mean, could be. It could very well be that some couples actually take the cheder yichud to do the deed and consummate the physical marriage, right? Physically consummate the marriage. But I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so. Because, I mean, you're already presumably under such stress. You're all excited, and it's if you're fasting, you might be a little weak, and after the chuppah, and there's just so much. You're on such a high that I don't know. But maybe, I don't know. Unseen Waters says, I have noticed that when I read the Torah, it helps me follow the commandments better by observing the consequences of the mistakes made by various characters in the Torah, right? This is something I tell my boys all the time. I tell my kids all the time. More than we learn what to do from the Torah, we learn, and from the Bible by and large, we learn what not to do. Right? There's a river of blood running through the entire Bible. There's just a whole slew of errors, mistakes, and sins, and so many wrongdoings and backstabbings. And I'm referencing the Hebrew Bible. The Christians have their own thing with all of that there too. But, right, and certainly in Torah, and these Torah portions now of the book of Bamidbar, of Numbers, where there's so many stories of the Israelites and the other, right, and the mixed multitude and everything that went on there, and the spies in this week's Torah portion and everything that happened there. And then, I mean, there's just what more than what to do, it's what not to do, especially now when we have no temple and we have only a very small, relatively small amount of commandments de facto to do. They may be so significant that they can be oh, so what I'm looking for. Never mind. Some commandments can be set against 613, meaning even though you do only one commandment, right? Let's say the Sabbath or studying Torah, it can be weighed against the same as 613 commandments, like all of them, because it teaches you something so valuable, and it orients you in such a way where it's as if you had completed the entire Torah right then and there. So, right, temporarily at any rate. And I mean temporarily, like here and now. Obviously, the things that we do echo for eternity. So yes, when you read the Torah, it helps you to follow the commandments. That's precisely what it's there for. Torah, right? Torah actually means to teach, to guide. And in Aramaic, oraita, right, which is light, which is, again, teaching, illuminating. It's supposed to light the way ahead. That's why it's there. That's why we are commanded to read it constantly, day and night. That's why we are commanded to embody it and fulfill the mitzvahs. That's why we are commanded to teach it to our sons and daughters. Because it's the Hebrew way. What is the 7 blessings over the wine at the Jewish wedding? So the 7 blessings, aka Sheva Brachos or Sheva Brachot, 7 very particular seven very particular blessings. One of them is the ordinary blessing for the wine, for the grapes, for the fruit of the vine, and the other have to do with unity. They have to do with Zion. They have to do with man being created in the image of God. They have to do with the fact that the couple being married are beloved friends, re'im ahuvim. And they say that every couple that gets married are like the original couple in Eden, right? Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, who were the only two people around at the time, biblically speaking. And in the same way that Adam and Eve were meant for each other, and it was as if they were the only two people in the world, and biblically speaking, the Torah says they were, then the Chatan and Kala, the bride and groom, should always be thinking of themselves as two of them, right? Two of them against the world. And that's what I told the groom last night. I pulled him aside. I said, hey, if nobody told you yet, it's you and her against the world. And to which he replied, poor world. But yeah, the idea that Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, were the only ones, right, and they were made for each other, that's the way that the Chassan and Kala, that the bride and groom, the king and queen, ought to be thinking of their own union. And that's how they should go forward. So the different blessings, I mentioned what they're about. I won't go through them one by one, but they are very special, and they are recited throughout the 7 days of the feast, not just on the day of the wedding, the night of the wedding and the day of, but the 7 days of feasting, the Shivat Yemei Mishteh. If there is a congregation of at least 10 male Hebrew people who are 13 and above, then those blessings are recited over a cup of wine. So what is it? Special blessings that are for the bride and groom, that are for the children of Israel, and are for the world at large, and human beings specifically, Adam, right, made in the image of God, and that there is something that lives on past us. And the way for something to live on past us, right, something that when we are dead and gone, right, we don't take money, we don't take riches, we don't take anything but Torah and good deeds. The legacy that we leave many times is carried on through our children, for better or worse, and so on and so forth. And the wedding is what makes that possible, because, the wedding is not just for the union of man and woman, but for what comes from that, right, which is kids, more often than not, right? Obviously, there are outliers and there are exceptions to that rule. Peace and Coffee says, Yon, if you want to brush up on Mashiach studies and all things messianic, read the book Mashiach, Who, What, Why, How, Where, When, by Chaim Kramer. Okay, well, enlighten me about Chaim Kramer. Who is he? What is he? When is he? Is he a Messianic? Is he a Christian? Is he an ordinary Heb? Do let me know. Jesse Link says, Moses. Well, once again, I don't have the context. Sorry about that. Peace and Coffee says, a humble person is one aware of their sinfulness and not aware of their piety or so-called good works. I mean, you could think of it that way. But you can be aware of your good works, and it doesn't mean that you don't attribute goodness to them, but it means that you know you also still have so much more to do and such a long way to go that you're willing to say, yes, I've done X, Y, and Z, which were good, and I still have a ton more to do. This is something Rav Kook says about tshuva, about repentance, about returning to Adonai. And he says it's always twofold. On the one hand, it gives you comfort and solace because you are wanting to, there's a light that comes on inside of you, a very bright light, when you want to repent truly and when you are starting. The problem is that the light is so bright that you can see every tiny blemish. Right? Because if it was a dark sort of light, if it was very, very dim, then you could see a little bit here and there. But when it's a very bright light, like a fluorescent, like this illumination going on inside of you and in your mind, then you can see every tiny little speck, every tiny little minuscule piece of dirt and filth, of unworthiness, right? Of things you still need to make right and amend. And so he says the tshuva, right, redeeming yourself and returning to Adonai is twofold. That on the one hand, it fills you with comfort and solace and grace, and on the other hand, it shows you how much more you need to do. So let's see. By the way, has anybody seen, says BMXers, Dune Part 1 and 2? I haven't read a Dune, I haven't seen Dune, not the first ones, not the current ones. I'm way, way behind. I haven't read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy yet. So many things. Jesse Link says, my question is, why did they make the golden idol after seeing the things Hashem did in Egypt? He said don't make any idol. Why did they do it? What's your opinion? Well, it's not my opinion. I follow the teachings of the Ramak. But you know what? I'll give you my opinion before I was made privy, if you will, to the teachings of the Ramak and to others. The calf specifically, is the youngling, right? It's not a cow or a bull yet. It's a calf. It's not mature. And it's golden. And it's something which still suckles from its mother's teat. Or what is it? Yeah, the cow has what is the udders, right? The calf suckles from the udders of the cow. It's not its own complete being yet. It's immature. And that golden calf, and the calf was also in Egypt and in other areas, if I'm not mistaken, at the time, was seen as a symbol of material plenty and wealth. And them coming out of Egypt and from bondage and from slavery, they could not truly fathom yet, even though they saw what they saw and did what they did and had those experiences. I suppose they couldn't truly fathom a God that is unknowable and unfathomable. They had to have a physical representation. They had to have something. And the fact that they made it of gold, which is a precious metal, and the fact that it was a calf, which is an immature, incomplete, in some ways, being, still suckling the milk from its mother's udders, it means that they were kind of aware that they still were immature. They were aware that they were still needing to suckle off the teat or the udder of something, but they made the mistake by making it into a golden idol. I suppose they did it because they had to have some physical representation. They had to have something. These are people who were in Egypt surrounded by physical manifestations of lower gods, of forces of nature. It makes perfect sense to me that not so fast would they come to the understanding, the knowledge, the way of the Torah, which says that no man shall see me and live. Lo yir'ani ha'adam v'chai. It's that's like my straightforward thoughts on it, and I'll leave it at that. Okay, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Robert Harrison says, being humble does not mean thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. A wise man told me. Yes, that's nice. So yeah, I think we are all saying part of the same thing, which together brings about humility. Because so far, all the different answers that I'm reading here are all aiming towards that same thing, right? Awareness. It has to do with thought and awareness, right? That's what we're saying. So I agree. BMXer says, somebody who walks barefoot and with sackcloth and ashes. So yeah, there are the sackcloth people, right, in South Africa. And what are they Rasta? I don't recall now, but they there's not a lot of them. They live in kind of a wilderness outside of the city, and they go in there to trade and make money. But if I'm not mistaken, I saw a very short, like 10 or 15 minute documentary. BMXers, maybe you sent me that documentary on the sackcloth people and what they do, right? They take themselves sort of out of society. Incidentally, the New York Nazarite, just this morning, had a short where he says, I didn't take myself out of society. It's society that took themselves away from me. Because they see him, he says, and they just make a big, right? They give him a wide berth, and they go around him, and they don't engage with him. So it's not that he removed himself from society, it's that through his Nazarite vow, society had moved themselves away from him. And that's an interesting way to look at it. Peace and Coffee says, is this prayer a prayer book or from Psalms? O Zion, I will forgive the sins of the nations, but not for spilling the blood of my children. I'd have to read it in Hebrew. I mean, there is... Oh, wait, am I lagging? Is something going on? Suddenly there was a lag. It's pixelated. I don't know what's going on. Maybe you see me, maybe you don't. Okay, I'm sure it's fine. So I don't recognize it offhand. I mean, there is the, what is it? Is it the book of Amos, right? The three sins, but the fourth one will not be overturned, right? Where he speaks of Judah and he speaks of Israel and he speaks of a few other nations. And he said, for three sins I'm willing to forgive, but for the fourth one, is it the book of Amos, if I'm not mistaken? One of the prophets, one of the later prophets. Okay, let's see. BMXer says, yep, Brandywine. So the Brandywine, that's from the Lord of the Rings, or the Hobbit, right? The Brandywine River, it's on the border of Buckland, right? If I'm not mistaken, in the Hobbit, or is it in Lord of the Rings? Well, it's the same world, right? It's in Middle Earth. Brandywine, same as in Afrikaans, spelled different and maybe pronounced slightly different. Yeah, okay, I get that. I know it from the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit. No, it's Lord of the Rings, I think. Chaim Kramer says peace and coffee is Orthodox, Jewish, maybe Chabad. Okay. Jesse Link says, so maybe I'll check that out. I mean, when you say brush up on messianic teachings, what do you mean? Because I have the way that I view Mashiach. I mean, I was talking about people. I was talking about Mashiach with a few people who, we had conversations on the way to the wedding. We had some nice, deep conversations, a lot of Torah, talking about music, talking about the 90s. Good times. The Torah says Moses was the most humble man who ever lived. Sorry, that's what I meant. Oh, okay, so Moses, that's what you meant. Okay. Right. Hey, Bloodnose. Hello, Bloodnose. Good to see you. Love the username. Love it. Love it. These are the things God's chosen people are supposed to instruct everyone, but there are too few teachers and too few listeners. Well, I'm not sure precisely what you're referring to there, Bloodnose, but there have been times where other people in this chat have said the same, that just this dialogue right here, a civil, open, honest, to the degree that we can be honest, dialogue, is something that in and of itself, it's not just intellectual masturbation. As far as I'm concerned, this is supposed to be right here and now. It's supposed to be something that I take that can help orient me, that can help guide me, that can help open my mind, expand my mind. And it's something that I'm so happy to be engaging with you people. I'm so happy to be doing it. These are the things God's chosen people are supposed to instruct everyone. Well, who do you mean by God's chosen people, and what precise things? Because I'm not sure when you wrote that particular thing in the chat. So if you could elaborate, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Robert Harrison says, what's some advice to a married couple on how you serve your wife? Well, I don't remember who told me this, but when you get married, you need to assume from the beginning, even if you know your woman already, because marriage is different. It's very different. You make a covenant, you make a pact, a bond, and you need to understand that you speak different languages. You speak different languages, and you need to come to her and say, I don't know anything. Teach me your language. And I'm not talking simply about love languages, although that's a very but in the same vein of love languages, right? Teach me about your love language. Teach me about your everyday language. Teach me about this, that, and the other. Even if you've known each other, even if you were living together, even if I don't know how many years. But I think the idea is to understand that we don't speak, right? Same as we don't share consciousness and we don't share our being. We share parts of it, revelations of it, persona, masks, right? But we don't ever truly share each other's consciousness. And so if you want to know something, ask. And ordinarily, if they tell you something, believe them. Unless you have very good reason to believe that it's just being sarcastic, facetious, or I don't know, for whatever reason, untrue. When they say something, especially if they repeat it, right, then over time, believe them. But yeah, know that you don't speak her language and she doesn't speak yours, and you need to learn each other's language, and you need to learn and study her as if you don't know her. Same thing with you, as if you don't know who you are, because you don't know what you're like as a husband. You may know what you're like in a million other things. You don't know what you're like as a husband. And so that idea of how to serve your wife has to do with who your wife is and what she considers service. And that's how you learn how to do it. And if you can do it badly at first, and you need to be upfront about this, hey, listen, woman, I want to be a good husband to you. We are both in the service industry now. We need to learn how to best serve and service each other. But you need to be upfront about it. You need to be honest with me. And you need, right, in love and in truth. And you need to let me do it badly at first. Maybe 5 times, maybe 50 times. But once you get that ball rolling, and once it becomes part of your understanding, then you have a lifetime of serving one another in the most accurate, best possible way. So you don't have those instances where you don't know because she's told you, right? And obviously people change, circumstances change. Everything, it's dynamic, right? It's give and take, ebb and flow, blah, 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 blah. But as long as you can keep that communication going of, okay, so what do you need now, right? For instance, the classic, right? The classic, she starts talking, right? And so you say, okay, is this a conversation? Is this something where you need me to listen? Is this something where you're looking for me to bring you an actionable plan, right? Of something that can be done? Are you looking to just vent to me and that I will, I mean, what are we talking about here? In the same way, right? You don't know your wife, so you need to get to know her, and you need to be very upfront and clear about that. I don't know you. Teach me your ways. Teach me how to speak wifey, because I don't know. And that's my take on how to best serve your wife. BMXer says, okay, so nobody's seen Dune or nobody interested, but there's a reason I'm asking. I assume, he says. Robert Harrison continues, on the comment on evangelism, Melik Shlomo say he that winneth souls is wise in proverb. Oh, HaMelech Shlomo, King Solomon says, he that winneth souls is wise. Okay. He that winneth souls is wise. In other words, you can win souls over with wisdom. I think I dig that. Definitely if it's in Mishlei, if it's in Proverbs. The experience, right? There's having intelligence and like street smarts or whatever, and then there's having wisdom. Wisdom is often born out of hardship, out of failure, out of missing the mark. And when you are able to know something different because of your experiences, that's wisdom. When you are able to overcome certain things, that's showing that you have wisdom. And there's a difference between simply being intelligent and being wise, right? You can be very smart but do stupid things, and that's not too wise. And you can be smart, right, and still be very egocentric and serve only the hedonic here and now, me, mine, and now, and not think of yourself in the long term or of others around you, and that also is unwise. So I think wisdom, it has a longer time span, a longer time horizon. I think that's what differentiates wisdom, one of the things that differentiates wisdom from intelligence, I think. Coffee says, peace and coffee, Messianic in the Orthodox view, not Messianic for what it means for believers in Jesus. Okay, well, there are so many different midrashim, right? External teachings about Messiah. There are so many verses that allude to Messiah. There are those who were anointed, right? Priests and prophets and kings of Judah and of Israel. So many things were anointed with oil, right? And the artifacts, and we need to, it's knowing who. Just today, here, I crumpled it up because I'm not a believer in this right now. But just today in the mail, right, this was in our mailbox, and it was, presumably it was kind of a spam thing where they delivered it to all the mailboxes in the area. And it speaks of a rabbi called Harav Nir Ben Arzi. Look him up if you want, Nir Ben Arzi. And he says that he is the Messiah. So if you want to know about how the Messianic thing is so unclear and screwed up in some ways, here's a man literally claiming to be the anointed one. Now, I have a problem with this because you can say, what you can say is I'm supposed to be the anointed one. Until you're anointed, you're not physically Messiah. You can be a potential Messiah, but he does not say this here. He says, God chose me to be Messiah. But to be chosen is one thing. To be anointed physically and embraced by the people and given a crown of authority, that's another. And this is full of text and pictures of him with different rabbis. And by the way, it says here, these images of the rabbis is not supposed to mean that they endorse him. It's images from the past, and it's here to show that he is an actual Orthodox rabbi who, and to sort of buttress his claim of being Messiah. And and he gives all kinds of prophecies, if you will, on the backside, on all the different nations. And here he is, Harav Nir ben Arzi. And he's alive, and he's here now, claiming to be Messiah. And he is one of many who claim that they are the Messiah. It's difficult to know because we have not anointed him. It's difficult to know because there are so many fakers. It's difficult to know because we have been bamboozled before by the likes of Shabtai Tzvi, by the likes of different cults that were messianic, even cults nowadays that consider themselves to be messianic. And it's so unclear, and you don't want to make the wrong move here. You really don't, because if you follow the wrong person, it will lead you just straight off a cliff, into oblivion. And it's really nigh impossible to know who to anoint. However, the Rambam is very clear on this. Maimonides is very clear in the laws of the kings and their wars, in his book Yad HaChazaka, Mishneh Torah. And he says, a man, he doesn't have to be from the house of David, mind you. That is said to be the final Messiah, but a Messiah, a king Messiah, does not need to be from the house of David. It can be of any tribe. He says, if he unifies the people, builds the temple, moves to eradicate Amalek, that person is a potential Messiah, for sure. And over time, many people have claimed that throne, that crown, but they have not yet rallied the people. The temple has not been built, and the people of Amalek are scattered and unknown. So how it will come about, far be it from me to know. But here, for instance, right, Israel in time of war, and I'm getting this as spam mail in my mailbox. Right? This person who claims to be Messiah. Let me be very clear. He may very well be a potential Messiah. Everyone of every tribe of Israel is a potential Messiah. But are they anointed? Actually. Have they been embraced by the people? Actually. Do they have a kingdom to rule over? Actually. No. Because we are very torn apart, very torn, very scattered, even in Israel. We may be together geographically, but there's so many controversies and differences and so many things going on. And Mashiach, speaking of messianic teachings, right? And I had to show you this because I came home from work and it was in the mailbox. Not for the first time, by the way. This is not the first time that such a thing showed up as posters outside, on billboards, or in people's mailboxes, or it's the messianic thing, right? There's the famous Jerusalem syndrome of foreigners or people who come to Jerusalem and suddenly think that they're Messiah. That's a real thing, Jerusalem syndrome. Okay, let's continue. Robert says, honestly, I think you wear the crown of Torah, which is humility, and you can see it the way you go about this chat. I certainly strive to be humble, but I still have so much more to go. Always. I will go to my grave, not even completing a tiny fraction of what I can. I think that's true to most people, right? There's always more to do. There's always that ideal keeps, right? The more you walk towards it, the more it is fleeting, let's say. But there is a lot of promise in the journey, and there's a lot of value in the journey, and that's what I'm going for. As for the crown of Torah, no, right? I'm a student of Torah, but I'm certainly not a master. And I think that will be the case my entire life. Jesse Link says to Peace and Coffee, what's your view on what Messiah is to you? Eliram Noam Osmos, Shalom Ach Sheli, Shalom Lecha Noam. Eliram Noam Osmos. Osmos, what family name is that? Please do share. I'm interested in the family name. Eliram means my God is mighty. and Noam means gentleness or kindness. No, not kindness, more like gentleness. So that's a beautiful name. I don't know if it's your name or just a profile name, but yeah. The Bedekin ceremony, says Robert Harrison. So yeah, the Bedekin. The Bedekin is when the groom covers the bride's face. Wait, I may be confusing it with something else. Um, no, the Bedekin is the veil. When the groom puts the veil over the bride's face. And my boy turned to me yesterday, and he says, and I say, this is something the groom does. He walks over to her and he covers her face. And he asked me, why does he do that? I didn't have an answer for him. I don't think, maybe I learned about it a long time ago, but I have no answer off the top of my head. I mean, I have one that I could come up with based on what I know of the idea of bride and groom. Hmm? But I have no, I didn't have a proper answer, right, baked into my brain of, oh, our sages say this, halacha says this, the midrash says this, but that idea of covering the face, it's the final adornment. I see it, right, I see it as her entrusting him and letting him guide her, right? It's the parents who then take the wife, the would-be wife, the bride's hands, and they lead her to the canopy, to the chuppah. He goes first, she goes after him. And you know what? I don't know enough about the Bedekin ceremony, not offhand, but it has to do with, let's say, the final adornments of the Kala, right? Before the female and before the feminine and masculine divine presence can unify, the Kala, the bride, needs to be adorned. She can't just be she can't just show up off the street. There are certain things that she needs to do in order to awaken the male's desire, and those are what's called tikkunim. Tikkunim, it can mean amendments, and it can also mean adornments. And so it's when the bride has what's called the 24 tikkunim, right? Is it kafdalet? I think it's the 24 kishutim, right? 24 adornments. And it has to do with, again, the divine revelation as it's brought down in the tree of life. It has to do with the fact that the groom, right, the bride is there, the groom performs an action, and in doing so, he is able to awaken something in the bride, and the bride awakens something in him, and there's this dance that is happening between them. And him covering her face, it's, it has to do literally with faith, because she cannot see, right, or she can't see as well. And she is being led to the chuppah, right? And we are being led through this life. That's what my mind went to anyway. But if anybody else has any thoughts on the Bedekin ceremony, because nothing pops into my head. If I did learn about it more religiously in the past, it was a long time ago, and nothing comes into mind right now. Though I don't doubt that if I continue to think about it, things might pop in. Certainly after I'm done here. Wow, I've been on for over an hour, and I want to take the time right now to thank all of you here, everybody in the chat, Eliram, Jesse, Robert, BMXers. Who else is here? Let's see. Who else was here? Bloodnose was here. Is here, maybe. I don't know. I think that's it for now. Okay, let's see. Where was I? I was here. Wait. The Bedekin? The Bedekin. Okay, so here we are. I hear people actually think the Rebbe is still alive and island somewhere. Go figure. Yes, some people, Chabadnikim, right? Chabad people. Some Chabad people know that he's dead, and some people say, no, he is still alive. He's still in the 770 Eastern Parkway, Brooklyn, New York. Some say, no, he's still alive, but he's in seclusion on an island somewhere or a secret location, but he's still teaching and still... Look, it was a great blow to Chabad because he did not appoint a successor. And so, Chabad is one of the more ancient Hasidic courts. One of the original Hasidic courts, going back hundreds of years. And The Morazaken, I mean, the master of the Tanya, the one who wrote the Tanya, I mean, it's just, and to not have a Rebbe now, that's a great blow to any Chabadnik. I don't fault them for thinking this. I don't fault them for hanging on to him and thinking that he's here in physical form still. I don't fault them, but it's not the way of the Torah. When we die, we die. That's it. I mean, eating from the tree of life and having that resurrection and rising above death and eliminating death and slaughtering the evil inclination and everything that that entails, that will come. But for now, when you're dead, you're dead. You can speak of reincarnation and you can speak of what's even called a dibuk, right? When you sort of are a spirit or a soul, but you or an ibul, right, for the righteous, where you are a kind of spirit, but you can come into a living body. Not possession per se, but there's a sacred possession and an impure possession. Let's leave it at that. And dibuk and ibur. So yeah, people actually think that. Not all of them, obviously. It's a great point of contention and controversy within Chabad itself on where the Rebbe is. Is he in a coffin, or is he, is he in the ground, or is he still teaching? I personally think, yes, he died. He could have been Messiah. He could have been anointed, but he wasn't, and he died without claiming the throne, without being presented with the crown, without being embraced and anointed as the King Messiah, and so he wasn't literally Messiah. He wasn't. He could have been, definitely could have been, if he would have rallied the people and, everything that Messiah is supposed to do, right? Fight the good fight. BMXers says, he who speaks does not know, he who knows does not speak. Surely he must become the fool. Jackie Chan with dreadlocks in Forbidden Kingdom. I didn't see Forbidden Kingdom, and I've never seen Jackie Chan with dreadlocks. But once again, right, quoting the Tao Te Ching there, at least that first part is quoting Lao Tzu. I love the Tao Te Ching. Jesse Link says, there's things that the Messiah has to do in the Hebrew Bible. Anyone can claim anything, but unless he does them, not Messiah in my book. Right, potential Messiah, but not actually Messiah. So there are grave differences, right, between claiming to be and actually being. But anybody can be a potential Messiah. BMXers says, yes, they are Rastas, and I did send you that documentary. Right, so they're Rasta. Rastafari. Daniel Santos, hello, hi Daniel, how you doing? Good to see you again. What fun to see so many good people here in the chat. Plus, I don't see world peace yet. Well, look, that idea of Messiah bringing world peace, that can be attributed to the final Messiah, perhaps, not any Messiah. It could be that Messiah's kings will come and live and rule and die like any man before that and fight the wars, and there will be wars. You don't know. And maybe that final Messiah will bring around that world peace, unify the people. It's not Brandywine, but Brainywine. Well, you know what? What are the chances that Tolkien didn't use the Brainywine, didn't use Brandywine from Brandywine? What are the chances? BMXer says, women are from Venus and men are from Mars, indeed. Yes, quite right. Kabbalat Panim, the reception, says Robert Harrison. So yeah, that's like a straightforward wedding reception where you have some nosh and you schmooze, and I mean that in a positive way. Jesse says, Yud and Hey, when male and female come together, I follow you. Well, there's the Yud and the Hey are the higher male and female, known as father and mother. The lower is the Vav Hey. The lower male and female are the bride and groom, right? Chatan v'kala, or ben v'bat, or zachar v'nekeva. And through their union, and through bringing new life into creation, then they are the mother and the father. But you need to be the lower, right? You need to crawl before you learn to walk, and you need to be the fool before you can become the master. And you need to be that bride and groom before you can be mother and father. So yes, the Yod He and the Vav He. Now it's said that in the future, the Yod He will also be in this world, and it will be a mirror image, right? It won't be Yod He Vav He. It will be Yod He Yod He. Well, there's a lot there. But yeah, it will be a mirror image, some say. Daniel Santos said, I read that there once was an alleged Turkish Messiah who later forcibly converted to another religion, right? Shabbatai Tzvi. If you've heard the Yiddish phrase "Oy ve'izmir," I don't know if you've heard it. If you have, that speaks of Izmir in Turkey. So Shabbatai Tzvi, which lived, I think, in the 1600s. Which of the alleged messiahs do you respect most? He says. Well, David, the king of Israel, was the greatest of kings. He had his faults, but he was a great king. King Yoshiyahu, King Chizkiyahu, but which one? I suppose it was King David, because even though he had his faults, he was a warrior, and he was a poet, and he was a man of Torah, and a man of halacha, and he was able to acknowledge his mistakes and repent, and that takes balls, and that takes humility, and that takes courage, and those are all positive traits. And to be that warrior poet, the way that David was, in spite of his frailty and his humanity, he was the greatest king. He was. And he was, I mean, and when he had that cat and mouse going on with King Saul, with Shaul, and the way that he speaks about him, he says, no, I cannot hurt the anointed one. Who the hell am I? And when he speaks to him and he says, who is the king of Israel? Who are you chasing? This tiny little flea? This dead dog? That's what he calls himself. That's something, man. So, wait, which of the alleged messiahs or actual messiahs? Because the ones I mentioned were actual kings of Judah. So I'm not sure which you meant. Those were not alleged messiahs. Those were messiahs according to the Bible. So Daniel, can you clarify which ones you mean? So yeah, the Turkish messiah Shabbatai Tzvi was imprisoned by the Sultan, and he died in prison, and he converted to Islam. Many of his disciples, or at least a chunk of his disciples, converted because of him to Islam, and it was such a tragedy that the idea of Hasidism, which showed up afterwards, that the idea of Hasidism, which began with Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, that's part of the reason why it was seen as such an abomination in the Orthodox rabbinic faith and way of life. In the beginning, there was a lot of hitnagdut, a lot of pushback that sometimes came to real like excommunication and burning of books, and these are things that went on for hundreds of years, because they said no, you can't do that. You can't, because if you teach Hasidism and if you try and incorporate Kabbalah into everyday life, you end up with Shabbatai Tzvi. You end up with going down the wrong path. It is dangerous, and it will cause many people to just lose their way. There were so many people all around Europe too who were sure that Shabbatai Tzvi is the King Messiah. They rejoiced. They were like, oh yes, this is happening. We are doing this. He is here. Let's go. And then it just went completely wrong. And it caused many people to lose their faith, in Chassid, to lose their faith in such people who claim to be Messiah, in the idea of Messiah, in the Hebrew faith, and in Torah, and in commandments, and it just went completely off the rails. Which is why when some people get this in the mail, with this guy claiming to be Messiah, they don't go for it so fast, because we know that there have been many people claiming to be Messiah who ended up with hundreds, if not thousands, of disciples, and who went completely the wrong way and took a lot of them with them, and different cults, and there have been people who did not claim to be the Messiah, but who said, no, we need to do this and this and that in order to bring about the Messianic age, and in order to reveal the Messiah in the world. And they said, no, we need to break every single commandment in the Torah. If we break enough commandments, if we commit enough transgressions, God will have no choice but to redeem us, because we've sunk so low. That's an actual thing that people did. Some continue to do, because they claim we're in the Messianic age now, and so the commandments are null and void, and so we can do whatever we want. It's so confusing sometimes. Now, for some people, I have no doubt things are crystal clear. For the mainstream, everyday Joe, and I'm one of them, I'm Joe, I don't know. But I do know that it's something so fragile, so sensitive, so fraught with difficulties, and so many ways in which it can just go down the shitter, that right? You can end up in such a bad place that you need to be sure. You need to be so sure that you've anointed the right one or embraced the right one as a potential Messiah. It's really, really difficult to know. Really difficult. So those are my thoughts on Shabtai Tzvi. Incidentally, a short little thing. I studied about Shabtai Tzvi and the rise of Hasidism afterwards and all the controversy between the Misnogdim, right, the people who were against Hasidism and the Hasidim themselves and the Hasidic sects and courts. I studied that in 11th grade. Now, that is steeped in Kabbalah, and more specifically Lurianic Kabbalah. And it's part of what got me thinking of, oh my God, I was never taught this. I was never taught all of these things that I was learning as part of history, because I took like what would it be? I took like extra credit history. And that's what we were learning that year. We were learning about Hasidism, right, of Shabtai Tzvi and the rise of Hasidism. And so I was in 11th grade, starting to come into my own a little bit spiritually. And by that I mean just starting, asking deeper questions, wanting to know, growing up religious my whole life. But why, where, how, when, what? Much like that book, BMXers, right? Why am I doing this? What's the point of it? How do I go about it? Who am I? What is God? All of those existential questions. And ontological questions, epistemological questions, all of that, theological questions, and that, which was just like a history class, right? Just a class in relatively modern Jewish history, a few hundred years old. But it showed me that, oh, wait, I was never told this. You mean to say that this is something that happened even just recently? And it really opened up my mind and opened up my eyes. Things that I wasn't taught in shul, right? Things that I wasn't taught in synagogue, things that I wasn't taught up until that time, not in school and not in any kind of youth group or not from any rabbi but in 11th grade at advanced history, right? Extra credit history for that year. That's what I was learning. And it really, really facilitated, because I already had, I was 15, 16 or 17. And I was already beginning, or even more than beginning, right, to ask those questions. And that came precisely on time. And when I read about that, and when I started to understand through that history lesson in high school, that history class, on what the idea is of Kabbalah, what is it to receive, what is it that we are meant to receive, and how, and why it was such a battle with Hasidism, I said to myself, whoa, let's explore this. And I haven't stopped since. So let's see. Dreadlock says, I assume nobody here saw them nor interested in me asking. I mean, it's an assumption that you can make based on people not reacting. But people, if you have seen Dune 1 and 2, engage a bit in the chat with BMXers. He has questions about Dune. I would reference and address it, but I don't know. Robert says, also the opposite episode of Seinfeld, the opposite, where George told off the Yankee owner is hilarious. Yeah, that's... all for the glorification of your massive ego. Jason Alexander. And all the writers there. I, as a screenwriter who has written one or two, not produced, right? Nothing that came to fruition yet. But I wrote 2 comedy series, 2 sitcoms, which I love because I wrote it. It still needs work, but I love them. I really do. So as somebody who wrote 2 comedy series, I know how difficult it can be to craft a good joke. And I'm only saying that because I had other people who read it and said, yes, these certain things here are very funny. And I know how difficult it is to craft a good gag, whether it's visual, whether it's verbal. Seinfeld is just, what a show. It can only be in the 90s. And right now, certain things aged okay, other things did not age well, obviously. Time moves on. But for its time, Seinfeld was perfect. Perfect. Truly. And I say that as a screenwriter, I say that as a connoisseur of comedy, if you will. I know what I like. I'm not really a connoisseur. But, Pinky, you okay? Yeah? Okay. Pinky Winky. Okay, let's see. Robert continues and says, when Saul contacted a witch, and Samuel was brought forth, in my opinion, and other messianic ivrits wasn't Samuel, but a demon, because what he told Saul didn't come to pass. I'm sorry, I seem to suddenly I'm drawing a blank, because he told him that he's going to die. Didn't he tell him that he's going to die in the war with the Philistines? And isn't that exactly what happened? It escapes my mind right now. I know what Saul told him. He said, the prophets won't answer me. God isn't answering me, and not in the dreams, and not in visions, and not in prophets, and not in the precious jewels on the breastplate of the high priest. I got nothing. Right? Because Samuel tells him, why have you upset me to conjure me in the Ov? Right? With witchcraft, if you will, with non-Hebrew ways. And he says, I can't. God's not answering me in these ways. Okay, let's see. So, Robert or others in the chat, remind me, if you will. Radar Shadow. Hello, Radar. How you doing? I think I'm going to be done soon. I'm starting to feel the vibes in my brain go. So hopefully we'll continue this tomorrow, but I'll read one or two more here. Radar Shadow asks, how many accepted sects of Judaism are there? Are they as numerous as the various Christian divisions? Well, seeing as how I don't know the Christian divisions, I couldn't tell you, how many accepted sects there are, because some are accepted by the sect and not accepted by the general public as proper Orthodox or other Judaism. But currently, right, not sects, but groups, right? You have Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, and I guess offshoots of those are the major ones, right? Orthodoxy being rabbinic law, and Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist being more modern. And there's also modern Orthodox, but yeah, those are I would say the major four. Those are the major. There's Hasidism, there's New Age, there's so many, but I think the major four is Orthodoxy, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist. I might be mistaken. Those are the four major ones that pop into my head. Robert Harrison says, plus God told people not to have any communication with people like that. Yes, no right? Lo lidrosh el hametim, not to go and seek the counsel of the dead. Right? Because what you can do is pray to God that because of the merits of those, and right, my forefathers, my ancestors, and the righteous who have passed away, because of them, may this come to pass. Right? But that's not asking the dead to speak to me. That's not asking the dead to do something for me or make something happen. What you can do is meditate, and some people go to grave sites and they pray to God. Some people do pray to the dead, and that's not a good thing at all. But the idea is to go and to pray to God and say, in the name of those who have passed, of the righteous and pious, of those who have passed, our ancestors, our brothers and sisters who did good things, because of their virtue and because of their merits, may we here in this world, living, breathing, walking, and talking, may we here merit X, Y, and Z. Right? Because of their great deeds, because of their works, because of their doings. But at no point are we supposed to say, we're not to pray to the dead, not to speak to the dead in the sense of, come and give me this, come and tell me this. We can ask for revelations, right? Right? If I have ancestors, let's say, in my family that I would want to say, instruct me, guide me in the right path, I would ask God to do so through them, right? Through that soul, right? In that body that had already passed. But I would not pray to the dead. And that's a major distinction. Major. I must say it again. English or Spanish? Well, I'm not sure what you mean. Hey, Gamerstorm. Hi. I'm not sure what you mean by English or Spanish. All right, no habla español, but I do speak English. I do speak Hebrew. So, I don't know. Misha Zaz Rishon, gay. Whoever moves first is gay. Well, here I am. I'm moving. So I guess I'm gay. I'm gay and happy and merry. That's true. I am. I try to be. BMXer says to Robert, by the way, bedek in Dutch and Afrikaan means to cover. Well, there you go. That's like a Yiddish term, right? So I guess it's from the German, because Yiddish is a kind of German Hebrew, and, well, in Hebrew letters. And German and Dutch have a lot to do, have a lot of similarities, and Dutch and Afrikaans have a lot of similarities. Robert says, how important is compromise to you in a marriage? It's very important because you always need to know which hill you should die on and which hill you can compromise on. You need to choose your battles. That's literally what that means. So if there are certain things that you are unable to compromise on, then you need to take responsibility and be upfront about it. But if you can compromise, don't be a doormat, right? In marriage, you shouldn't be a doormat. If there's something that, like a pillar that you want to put in the ground and hold fast to, do it. Be honest about it. Be forthcoming about it. Be able to express it. Because if you're going to do that and put that flag in the ground, this is where I stand, this is where I make my stand, then you need to be able to articulate it, and you need to have a few good arguments about why it is that you're doing this. You can't just do it arbitrarily, because there might be pushback, and there might be a dialogue, and there might be a discussion, and there might be counter-arguments. So compromise is very important, but so is knowing when to stick that flag in the ground and say, this is the hill I'm dying on. BMXers, Robert says, wow to BMXers. Adoni, Anglit or Sfaradit? Right, sir, English or Spanish? So I'm not sure, man. I'm not sure who you're referring to, but I speak English. I'm thinking that's pretty obvious. If you guys are hearing me speak a different language, now there's an experience, right? Okay. I love your answers, thanks. Look, they are always and ever partial answers, because I only have my experiences and things that I'm bringing down, and many times I'm just regurgitating things that I was taught. These are all very old ideas, right? I might give my own spin on it or my own phrasing, but like 99.99999% of the things that I say are things that I was taught, are things that I read, are things that were brought down to me through other masters, dead or alive. And so you should take everything I say with a huge grain of hummus, as they say, as I say, and do your own research, because my answers are very idiosyncratic sometimes, because I put my own spin on it, because I pick and choose, right? I'm a cherry picker. I pick and choose everything. BMXer says, I make mention to Rahab in Babylon to them that know I, in Ethiopia, this man shall be born there, and the highest shall establish the earth, Jah Rastafari. Bob Marley misquoting the psalm. Yeah, and he used to open up some of his concerts like that in the 70s. Right, that's from the Psalms, and he was misquoting it a little bit. Just a little bit. It's basically, right, Azkiraha v'kush lemor zayulad sham, right, a very famous psalm. The highest himself will establish the earth. That's right, that's right. LOL, toda, says Gamer. Zabedika shel yamenu. What do you mean, bedika shel yamenu? What do you mean by that? I mean, it's a test of our times, he says, or an examination of our times. Danielle says, I'm a bit of a spiritist nerd, LOL. Have you ever heard of Alan Kardec? No, I have not. But share, what do you think? And by the way, it's almost an hour and a half. When we reach an hour and a half, I think I'm going to stop and go live once again. God willing, Yah willing, we'll go live again tomorrow to continue this chat. Literally, the chat. We'll say, so a spiritist nerd, wonderful. Don't lose that. Don't lose that. It's wonderful to be a spiritist nerd, because it gives you that much more opportunity to implement things here and now in the world, and that's what we're here for. It's not supposed to stay in the ether of intellect. It's not supposed to remain in the ether of spirituality. It's supposed to be here in the guts and the blood and the muck of living here in this world. That's, you know, that's what we do here. Daniel continues. So no, I haven't heard of him. Do say. What is the best book that summarizes Judaism for beginners? There are so many. The Torah. That's the best book. That summarizes Judaism. You know, Breshit, the Torah portion of Genesis. That's a summary of Judaism. The first verse of Genesis is a summary of Judaism. Now, I mean, the 5 books of Moses. The 5 books of Moses. It has there everything that was, is, and will be. insofar as the human experience is concerned, because those are archetypal stories. Those are mythical stories, right? You can claim that they happened. It doesn't matter to me if they happened or not. They are stories that have been around for thousands and thousands of years, and they were passed down to us from father to son, mother to daughter, master to apprentice, and they are worthy of continuing. Because if you look at them, specifically if you look at them very properly, but even if you don't, you can see the entirety of human existence in all of its wonder and glory and misfortune and folly. It's all there. It's all there in the 5 books of Moses, where we are, where we came from, what we're doing here, and where we're heading to. It's all there. Now, if you're talking about Judaism as like an organized rabbinic religion, then, the book that summarizes it is a book of halacha, because that's the practical implementation of what it means to be Jewish. So that means the books of Maimonides, and that means the books of all of the sages who taught halacha. But as far as what's the best book that summarizes Judaism, ask a convert, because I was born into it. I grew up modern Orthodox in Jerusalem, and since I was born into it, I don't quite know. But if I had to say anything, the 5 books of Moses, that's what I go with. That's the major teacher of everything. And you can argue oral law alongside it came later, was codified, but the 5 books of Moses, are, that's the Torah, the written Torah. All right, I'm going to stop there. God willing, we will continue this tomorrow. Thank you, each and every one of you. I don't take it for granted that you're here. You could be doing anything else right now. Wherever it is, whoever you are, wherever you are, you're here right now live with me or watching it later. And I deeply appreciate every like, every sub, every comment, every engagement, every little reaction here on the side of these hearts that I see flying on the screen on the side. I deeply appreciate your kind attention and your engagement, and the fact that we are here in open dialogue, asking questions, receiving answers. You're giving me so much with your knowledge, with your wisdom, and I really, really appreciate it. So God willing, I'll see you tomorrow. We'll continue this chat. Until then, good night from Jerusalem.